Phil, what is your number two game of the year?
God of War.
God
God
of
of War
War.
is um my number two game of the year. This game had, I mean, it's just great. I mean, I've always said that if you ever played the original God of War and you know that the iconic weapons that he has, for them to kind of take and completely keep the character and change it for this game to be a more mellow, calmer character who's not going to rage out all the time and kind of create a completely different ambiance and environment is amazing, right? Because it added dimension to Kratos, that we're not just this rage monster that just wants to kill everything. The story was surprisingly touching. I thought the writing in it was great. The ending was amazing. And it really is truly a story about a father and his son and how they integrated all of the different Norse gods. I mean, I will say that I read the book Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman alongside while playing that game.
Oh,
I didn't do
interesting.
that intentionally. I just what happened to be reading that book. And it's just crazy to see the environment come to life. There was probably 50 plus hours of gameplay that I put into main story alone.
Oh,
God of War struggled from bosses are way too freaking hard syndrome. The side quest bosses were way harder than the main story bosses. So the main story bosses were pretty, I mean, one or two tries, you could figure out the combinations. The side quest bosses, and there were a lot of them, and I didn't do all. I did some. I think I slayed one dragon, and I killed a couple of the other harder bosses. Oh, they're no joke. And it is, you get stuck sometimes in these loops where an animation loop where you're just going to get stabbed 5 times. And you're like, this, it's one of those moments where it's like, this is BS. You know what I mean? Like, as a player, you're like, I'm just getting in this loop and I can't get out of the animation and I'm getting stabbed over and over again.
so
And it's just
frustrating.
designed that way. But there were some struggles with this game, right? There were things like that you go to a world map, and when you go around a world map, you can travel to one of the each of the different realms that you want to travel to, and at times the map would just be locked. So you wouldn't be able to travel to certain areas at certain times because of what was going on in the narrative, and it was for long chunks of time. And that was annoying to me because, once again, if you want to encourage exploration, you need to leave it as open as possible for people to explore whatever they want if they're in the mood for it. The other thing is that I am a person who does not like to play as the sidekick, right? If I'm playing a Batman game, I don't want to play as Robin or Catwoman. I want to play as Batman. If I am playing at God of War, I don't want to play as his son or someone else. I'm there. I'm not there to shoot a bow and arrow. I'm not there to play as a side character. I don't care like that sort of narration of telling the different perspectives from the different characters. For me personally, doesn't interest me. I like to just be the main character and have that be my person, especially since you kind of have to get used to using other characters. And so that kind of annoyed me because there were a lot of sections, but it plays into the whole story, right? Which is father and son. So you play as the father, then you play as the son, then you play as the father. And it's like, it works perfectly together. I just didn't enjoy playing as the son.
Oh man, I gotta be the
But
kid again. What is this?
right, with the bow and arrow, and you're like, why do I have to do this? But I mean, really, what can you say? I mean, you took a game that 15 years ago was so linear, and you've added an open world. You know, I could easily spend if that was my main game that I was just super into all the time. I could easily put up minimum of 100 hours into that game. And so value for dollar, value for time is there. And they pretty much, other than the small little complaints that I had, I can't say anything negative about the game. It was amazing. Fundamentally, this is one of the things that I struggled with when I was trying to buy the PS5 and I was on the fence because I take a really long time to buy things. Was like there was no generation defining game that was coming out to buy a next that was like you have to buy this game right now to get the new system. That's how it was, right? I remember back in my heyday when I bought the PS3. I remember buying the PS3, and the games that I bought for the PS3 were Elder Scrolls Oblivion and Resistance, and I believe I got MLB The Show. But to me, Elder Scrolls Oblivion was a brand new title.
Yeah.
I had never played an Elder Scrolls game. Resistance was Fall of Man was a brand new title. I'd never played before. And this new round of systems, other than playing games with better graphics, there hasn't been that thing there yet for me that said like, oh, you got to go out and get this. And that was a long-winded way of saying God of War was that game.
Wow.
Ratchet and Clank was that game, right? Those are both games that came out in 2022. I know that God of War came out in late 22, which is why I started playing it in early this year. But those were two games that, like, okay, if those had come out at launch of PS4, I mean, even though they didn't have any PS4s, that would have been like, we got to go to the store, we got to get this, we got to get PS4, go get it today, get the disc copy, and we got to play that today, right? But there just hasn't been a lot of titles like that. So that I couldn't say enough. That is a God of War Ragnarok is a system selling title that you go buy a system for. So number 2 for me.
Well done. Well done. Yeah, that is a game that is high on my list for being a system seller. Like that is something like, okay, I need to buy this to play this on a PS5. So my day will come, but probably not going to be today.
Probably not going to be today for me either for the Xbox.
I would say that my number 2 could be considered the last great game on the console that it was on, and it is Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. That is my number 2 game of this year. I hated Breath of the Wild. I would sit on discussions with gamers and listen to them gush about Breath of the Wild and how good it was, and it fell on deaf ears every time. I did not understand why people liked it. I thought it was really difficult to get through the different systems. It felt like it was slow. I had a lot of issues. We're not talking about Breath of the Wild. We're talking about Tears of the Kingdom. All that to say, Tears of the Kingdom has fundamentally expanded and improved on every one of the systems that I had an issue with in terms of comparing it to its predecessor. This game has done more in innovating its own platform and its own title than any other game that I've seen in terms of a sequel, right? Calling this a sequel to Breath of the Wild doesn't seem fair just because they built out so many different things. And I think that when you look at, okay, from someone who hated Breath of the Wild, I think Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is the second best game I played this year, bar none. It improves on every aspect of Breath of the Wild, abilities that allows a player to systematically change what's going on in the environment, and the resources can all be fused together and turn into like different creations that you just come up with off of a whim. Like all of these different systems playing and clicking together in this madman type atmosphere in this world is like baffling, and it still shocks me that they were able to overcome what they have. I mean, in comparison, they are actually giving player direction, which is what I needed to enjoy Tears of the Kingdom. Like they're saying, go to this corner, look over here. If you go into this cave, you better kill the frog because that'll tick off something at the end. Like giving you purpose to be in that world really gave me a sense of something to do in Tears of the Kingdom. And I really think that this game has expanded on Breath of the Wild in so many ways that it feels like a completely different game while being in the same world. The abilities are crazy, right? Being able to fuse stuff together randomly and create a whole new functionality with it, nuts. Being able to like actually reverse time and play with the different elements and platforms and the puzzles is game breaking on many different ways. I'm just really, really impressed with how this game had won me over. I think it's too long. I think the game is too long. I think that you get through that first push. It's like the first half, maybe the first 60 or 70%. You peek behind the curtain and you're like, oh, dang, there's still another 20 or 30% here, which in Breath of the Wild, I got to the end, quit, and then people were like, did you do the thing where you did the thing? And I'm like, no, I didn't do the thing. I finished the game and saw credits and moved on. So I do appreciate that they like actually built out the entirety of the game to see the cool stuff. But at the end of the day, like I was ready for this game to be done. And there is so much of this game that you could go forever. Like you could literally go forever in this game. Um, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is an amazing accomplishment in many ways. In my opinion, it is one of the best games of 2023. There are a lot of good titles that came out of this year. I am somebody who normally stays away from Nintendo first party titles because I don't feel like the system is keeping up with the other products on the market. And somehow this game sits in my number two spot. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is a feat. It's amazing. And I'm still blown away at the lengths they went to build this package out to the extent they did.
Well, I will say to you, as a side note, that I find it absolutely hilarious that you have two Nintendo
I
games in your
know.
top five this year, which
No.
you are not. Nintendo is not normally your jam.
No.
Normally, Xbox is normally your jam.
Yep.
So for you to have two, that speaks a lot of Tears of the Kingdom. But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that you
Yeah.
said it perfectly.
Yeah, you look at, you start in the sky. Okay, there's stuff in the sky, and then you go down to the main plane, and like, okay, cool. There's a lot of stuff down here, which is really neat to look at. And then when you realize that the entire map has been duplicated underneath your feet, and not only is it a whole new map, it's like Dark Soulsian in punishment and forces you to use skills that you will not gain anywhere else and use resources in a different way that you won't use anywhere else. Like you really step back and you're like, wow, like this game is huge. I see why people have fallen in love with it. And you could play this game for 300 hours and I still think you wouldn't see it all. And that's impressive. It's intimidating for a person like me who just wants to get in, get the experience, and get out. But boy, do I appreciate what they've done here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It was an amazing game. So good for you for landing that one. Good for you for sticking through it and getting to the end and like beating the final boss.
Well, you and I were
And
texting back and forth, and you're like, "Yeah, no, I unlocked the final boss. I'll go do it." I was like, "Oh, maybe it was Dr. Z." Anyway, I was like, "Yeah, you should go beat the boss. Just go beat the boss and get back to me." And then it's like a text message 20 minutes later, like, "Dude, really? Yeah, really? There's more here, man."
yeah, I mean, at that point in the game, I was like, how much more do we have?
Yes.
And it was like I was almost a little bit defeated because I had worked so hard to get there, and then I was like, there's still way more that
Yeah.
we have to do. So kudos to them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and why do I love this game? I mean, I played this game while traveling abroad on a 2-week vacation to the other side of the world, and I was on another planet with limited Wi-Fi, no internet connectivity on my cell phone, and I'm in airports and people are speaking foreign languages, and I'm locked in on my gamepad, and it's hard to separate like being on vacation in a beautiful country with like the game you're playing. But had I not been had I not been locked into a plane for 16 hours, I don't know that I would have finished this game. Nor do I know that I would appreciate it to the extent that I do. If you're looking for a game that you can buy and play forever, this is your game, but know that you're getting into a lot of game here.
Yeah, my son, I posted a short about it, but my son said, I want to start a new game with only 3 hearts. And so we switched over to my profile to do that. And he lasted all of about 10 minutes doing that. And he was like, yeah, this sucks. And I'm like, yeah, it's going to be like 100 freaking hours to get back to what all the hearts and gear and all the shrines and all the things you got to beat to get back here. So that nostalgia wore off real quick for him because it's a lot of game. And it's another one of those things where you're going to get a certain character and you're going to have your character and you're good. You don't need to go back. You don't need to redo, right? You're happy with the armor that you have and the things that you have because there's so much to it.
Yeah, one thing that I do like want to say lastly is like they've really set this game up to flex in different directions, which is very impressive, right? We kind of already talked about the underworld, but that is their take on like a very difficult Dark Soulsian type game. You're going to go down here, it's going to be punishing, you're going to get 1 or 2 hit killed, and you're going to get over it, or you're going to find your way through it, right? And then you go and you do some of these temples, and these temples are like puzzle masters. Like these are puzzles that you're looking at and you're like, I have no idea how to do this. And then you like go around the corner 3 times and you're like, oh, what if I boom, boom, boom? And then you feel like you broke it because that's not how it should be done. And lo and behold, you're solving puzzles and you feel like you're creatively coming up with solutions that are laid there in front of you, but breadcrumbed in such a way where it's not obvious, yet it reveals itself over time. So, as I mentioned, like Nintendo really pushes in these different directions in this game in a very, very good way. I thought the story was good. I thought the story in Breath of the Wild was horrible, and I was here for it. Like, spoiler alert, but at the end, like, there's dragons and it's super like anime style stuff going on, and I'm like, you know what? Sure, Zelda. Like, let's do sure. Why not? Like, I'm here for it. So I mean, overall, I really enjoyed it. It sits on my number two spot. Will I ever go back and play this game? Probably not. Will I expose my kids to it more? Probably at some point. Um, I when I'm building these top 10, top 5 lists, I always get into this place where it's like, am I lifting up the game I had the most fun with? Or am I lifting up the game that is the most technically impressive? And I try to find a blend of the two. And I think this one is more technically impressive than it is like high on my fun rating. But either way, in 2023, it's definitely worth mentioning.
Understood. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.